Haul the roll and go, where am I to go? Meet Johnny, where am I to go? For I'm a young and a sailor lad, and where am I to go?
Hello, and welcome to Where Am I to Go podcast. Today, before we start the show, I would like to bring up some business things that have kind of been on my mind so that you can know where to get more Where Am I to Go. First off, I'd like to talk about the Facebook page at Where Am I to Go podcast. It's on Facebook, and we've been posting some wonderful pictures of some of the places that we've been and some of the adventures that we've had. Not everything that we go and do is made into a podcast, and so we take pictures at different places and post those pictures so that you guys can enjoy some of the different places we've been. Also, I really am interested in listener feedback. I have an email address at whereamiitogopodcast@gmail.com. Again, that is whereamiitogopodcast@gmail.com. I would love to hear some of the listeners' comments and some of their ideas of places that might be interesting to visit and go and do. Today we are in Tucson, Arizona, and we are at the Titan Missile Museum, just south of Tucson, about 15-20 miles. And it's where the Titan missiles were deployed or were stationed, I guess. And today I happen to be here with Mike. This is a museum that I have wanted to see for the last 3 or 4 times I've visited Tucson. Mike said he'd take some time today and talk with me. I just got through doing the tour. It's fresh in my mind. And we are sitting down and having a conversation. Welcome, Mike, to Where Am I to Go podcast.
Well, thanks for stopping by, and thanks for wanting to know more about the museum.
This place is awesome. It's
really
a phenomenal museum.
So this is the only remaining Titan II missile silo in the United States.
What happened to the other ones?
They were decommissioned as part of the 1982 SALT agreement that we had with the Soviet Union at the time. So that was an arms reduction treaty that we bought in on, and the Russians did as well. So the 54 Titan II missiles that were stationed in the United States, we had 18 of them around Tucson here. We had 18 around Little Rock, Arkansas, and 18 around Wichita, Kansas. That comprised all 54 of the Titan II, which was the biggest and baddest ICBM that the United States ever deployed. 9 megaton warhead on each one of these things. 9 million tons of TNT.
That's a lot.
That is a lot.
I think the tour guide said something to the effect of 30 times or 40 times what dropped with both Nagasaki and Hiroshima.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
These were very powerful weapons. Airburst at 14,000 feet would result in about 900 square miles of total destruction.
Wow. That's not even fathomable. And it's a big missile.
It is a big missile. It's 103 feet tall, 10 foot in diameter. It's a 2-stage missile. Fully fueled, sitting in the launch duct, would have weighed about 330,000 pounds.
Wow.
At liftoff.
And how did you get it down inside the silo, the missile silo?
The missiles were built by Martin Marietta Corporation, which in turn became Lockheed Martin.
Okay.
That we've all heard of today, Lockheed Skunk Works. But back in the day, they were the ones that made the airframe. So the missiles were flown to the various bases, Tucson here being Davis-Monthan. They were semi-assembled, then brought out to the site here. The first stage would be lowered down into the silo with a big crane, empty.
Okay.
Doesn't have the fuel in it yet, so it's not going to be that heavy. So first stage goes in, second stage goes in, then the warhead reentry vehicle goes in last. Then the missile was fueled up, systems integrated, everything came up online, and that's how they got it in there.
Okay. And now when you say 3 stages, you've got your missile head on the top and 2 other fuel stages, is that correct?
Right. We had the first stage, the big first stage, 2 big rocket engines on that would take it up. That would burn for about 150 seconds.
That's all?
That's all. Second stage would ignite, burn for about 180 seconds, push that missile the second stage with the warhead, 8,000-pound warhead, up into space, way up above the space station.
Okay. So they went way in the air.
They went way up into space. Way
Okay.
up. Apogee, engines cut out, missile starts to come back down. It's going about 15,000 miles an hour when it starts to re-enter the atmosphere.
Oh, wow. And so it had stages like we see on the Apollo rockets. So one stage falls off, the second stage falls off.
Exactly.
Did they care where the stages landed at all, or?
No, it's World War III. We're not going to care.
We're not caring where they drop. Okay.
No. The whole thing was to get that warhead across in 30 minutes after launch to the Soviet Union, somewhere in the Soviet Union. So,
okay. So in other words, I didn't die of the nuclear blast, but I died when the rocket landed on top of me.
Well, yeah, might have been, and you might have been the fortunate one actually, because World War III with that kind of those kind of bombs going off would not have been a good thing. You and I would not be here talking today.
The nuclear winter and fallout would have taken care of whatever the bomb itself didn't take care of. That's just that's such a hard concept to grasp.
It is nowadays. We're so far removed. I mean, to some extent, it was the times. It was what was going on. It was the geopolitical stuff that was happening, and there was a lot of fear because we didn't know as much.
Right.
And now we have the technology to, we can know what's going on within a matter of minutes halfway around the world. Whereas back in the 60s, we were blind to some extent. We had spy planes, and we had some very early spy satellites, and we had spies, of course, that were feeding information out of the Soviet Union. But there was a lot of things that just terrified the United States because we were under the impression that the Russians had way more, and their capability at the time was exceeding ours, which later on turned out to be not the case.
They were better at playing cards.
They were better at playing cards a little bit, yeah.
Wow.
So that drove the hysteria, what was known as the missile gap.
Okay.
And that's one of the reasons why the Titan IIs were developed and rushed into production and into service.
And this was based on a theory or a principle of mutual destruction. If they fired, they would destroy us. If we fired, we would destroy them. But if both of us had all the missiles, it would try and keep something in check.
Exactly. Either one, the United States or Russia, Russia being the provocator in all cases, would have launched all of their missiles at us. Okay. They knew then with this Titan II and the systems that came on afterwards that even if their missiles were in the air, even if their missiles were 10 or 15 minutes away from starting to impact, they knew that these Titan IIs would be in the air within 3 minutes. And
within 3 minutes?
Yes, 3 minutes. That's all it took to launch one of these. Once the signal came from SAC, Strategic Air Command, to, as you saw on the tour, to get into that safe and decode the message that came through, the crews practiced. They had 3 minutes to decode that message, get into that safe, get that stuff out of there, and turn those keys.
Wow, 3 minutes.
Yep.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, it is.
Wow. That's just... Okay, so let's talk about the museum a little bit. As we come through the front doors, you've got a gift shop on one side, and you have another display that has the top, the nose cone.
The re-entry vehicle.
Re-entry vehicle, okay.
Right.
Sitting there, and then you've got several displays all the way on around of different pictures of the missile, different construction sites. You've also got a breakdown model of how the silo is constructed as far as the rooms and all of that type of stuff, which gives you a pretty good idea of what you're going to see on the tour.
Right. If you do the underground portion of the tour.
Right.
Yeah. And that's really the best. I mean, that's the reason everybody comes out here, is to go down into the silo.
Well, of course. Why would you go to a missile silo if you weren't going down?
That's right.
Other than there are some people I did notice that were elderly or weren't able to walk down the 240 stairs?
No, it's 55 stairs.
Oh, 55 stairs.
55 stairs down. You're about 40 feet underground.
Okay.
When you get down there, and exclusively on level 2. So that is the level where you go through the big blast doors that you saw, 6,000 pounds apiece.
We're talking about doors that are a foot wide.
Yeah.
All steel.
Yes.
Have cylinders for the locks that are probably 8-inch round.
Chromoly pins that were retracted out of the edges of the door. That would allow the door to be pulled open. The doors didn't open by themselves.
Right. And you had 4 different lock chambers.
Exactly.
In that.
Right. You have the 2 that you come through when you're on the tour. Though the first 2 that you come to are actually, that is the interface between the top side and the hardened part of the silo 40 feet underground. Those first 2 doors were designed to protect the silo and obviously the crew from a nuclear detonation up above.
Okay. And then the other 2 doors were? Those
2 doors were installed to protect the crew from, in case something happened to the missile. If the missile malfunctioned and blew up, that could as well ruin your day just as easily as a nuclear bomb going off upstairs.
And so if that thing blew up in the silo, the men that were inside the control room would have been kept safe from that explosion?
Yes. Yeah.
That's hard to fathom.
Well, now, we're not talking the warhead going off. We're just talking the fuel and the oxidizer blowing up.
Okay.
Yeah, no, if the bomb went off, that it would have been game over.
Okay. Yeah, I was having a hard time comprehending that.
Yeah. Yeah, no. Those were put in there to protect the crew in case something bad happened down in the missile.
Okay. And so the way the tour goes is you come on down a set of stairs, you enter an area where you can see all kinds of, you see the big doors.
Yeah, the blast, what they call the blast lock area.
And then you see some big shock absorbers and springs and some of that type of stuff that's designed for the building. Explain that a little bit.
So the sites were engineered to withstand an indirect hit, an airburst, chances if the Russians did get one over on us, and were able to get missiles close here. Now, a direct hit on the silo would have wiped the crew and the missile. Everything it would have ruined everything. But an indirect hit, some miles away, or an airburst, those springs were designed so that everything inside there could move a little bit. Inside the Launch Control Center, you saw the eight big giant springs. That whole portion, 3 levels, you go in, you're on the middle level of the Launch Control Center. You have an upstairs part where there is a crew rest. They had a little kitchen, a bedroom.
Oh, okay.
Down below, you had all the equipment for the radios and the 28-volt power supplies that powered the missile. So in the event of one of those bombs going off upstairs and the ground is going to shake, those springs were designed that whole portion of the silo could move up and down upwards of 16 inches.
Wow.
And from there, everything from in the Launch Control Center all the way down that big, long cableway, that connects.
That's probably, 150 feet long?
Yes. It's a
long hallway.
It's about 150 feet. That whole thing was the lifeline between where the missile was and the Launch Control Center. So all the electrical, plumbing, the water, everything ran down that cableway. That cableway was also supported on springs. I don't know if you remember.
Yes, I was looking at them going all the way down through.
And so even the missile was on springs.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
You had 4 big springs inside the silo that the missile sat on. And so obviously that's the thing that you want to protect, and you want to be able to launch that missile. If the missile wasn't on springs and you had an event, the missile would either explode or not be able to launch. So it was very well engineered. It is just amazing to go down there. There isn't a day goes by that I don't go down there and see something else that it just amazes how they thought of everything that they did. And you have to remember, this was all designed in the very late 50s, early 60s. So
that is amazing.
So we didn't have super-duper computer-aided drafting. things like that. We had these deals called slide rules and T-squares that all the engineering was drawn on,
Right.
and very, very rudimentary computers that could help us do stuff like that. So not only is it just cool because of the missile, but the engineering that went into this and the way these sites were constructed is something that you really need to see to appreciate.
Oh, yeah. And you have backup systems on everything. Everything's got at least two mechanisms to work. You got
Right.
two sets of speakers, well, actually 4 speakers, but 2 different sets at 2 different tables. You've got doubles on all of your computers that are in the control room.
Pretty much.
Or I don't know if those are really computers. They look like the old computer room that you see on the NASA flight.
Yeah, a lot of what you saw down there was the systems. They weren't computers. The computer for the missile was done in 2 stages. The very early guidance system was very, very analog.
Okay.
And that was replaced in 1978 with an upgraded guidance system that was a little easier to maintain and also to get the targeting information into the missile itself. But there was a lot of redundancy. There was many of the communication antennas that the site used to get the signals from either the Wing Commander's Post, Strategic Air Command, or even the Doomsday plane back in the day. We had antennas that were stored down in hardened silos underground. So in the event of a first strike, and the stationary antennas that were above ground would have been taken out. So in that event, the crew could push a button and raise 3 antennas up out of the ground to be able to maintain community, to get that launch order out. That was the whole thing. They were concerned about getting that message to launch the missile and again, being wary that the Russian missiles are already in the air. They could be as close as 10 minutes away, and so it was very imperative that the communication line was kept open.
Okay. That's way cool. Okay, so now we're down there. We've talked about the long haul going over to the missile silo itself, but you have the control room. And the control room, I thought, was quite small, but when you get down there, it's really fairly decent sized. It's probably a 25 by 25 or maybe even 35 by 35, kind of a round room.
It is a round room. It's a dome. It's actually the roof that you cannot see up above. If you'd have gone upstairs where the crew rest was, the roof is, or the ceiling is domed. It's all concrete, and it was domed like that to shed some of the intensity of an airburst blast. So it is fairly good size, but you have to keep in mind too that, and as you saw from the short video that we played that talks about these sites, it was a 4-man crew. Those 4 guys, their whole job was to launch the missile. Now, as you saw the complexity of this site, you can imagine the maintenance that had to be done on this thing from day to day.
No, I can't imagine the maintenance.
So there could have been upwards of 10, 15 people around any given day, depending on what the missile, if it needed to be worked on or something. So the room was, for 4 people, pretty good size. But you remember, you're going to be there with those big steel doors shut for 24 hours.
And you didn't come out. What happens if you got sick or you had a medical emergency or something?
Well, they would bring somebody in from the Wing Commander's Post up in Tucson. Depending on what kind of an emergency it was, they could replace one person. And it wasn't that the doors were locked and you couldn't get, not like a bank lock where you couldn't get out of there. I mean, you could. And there could be people, maintenance guys, coming and going at any given time to do something. So, but talking with the guys that actually used to be in there, one of our tour guides was actually a ballistic missile technician. And his recounts of being down in that room for 24 hours at a time was rather cold and very, very noisy because of the 28-volt power supplies down on level 3 those old AC converter things
Right.
made a horrendous whine, and a lot of the crews later on complained of hearing loss.
I would imagine
That was
that constant
a side
noise.
effect of being down there with that constant whine. 24 hours a day, you've got the radio going off from time to time. It was not a kickback, oh, I'm just going to sit here and watch things go. It was a different sort of assignment.
Okay, now they worked 24 hours. Does that mean that they had to be awake all 24 hours, or were they able to take naps every 5-6 hours for a half hour, or because it just seems to me like you wouldn't want somebody on the 23rd hour to be in charge of something this critical and this controlled. I mean, you had two guys had to open up an envelope at the exact same time. Two guys had to push buttons or turn keys at the exact same time.
Right.
And I know how I function after about 18 hours of no sleep. It's sometimes not really good. My brain starts fogging up. I can't imagine at 23 hours on a shift.
Right.
And being alert enough to be able to handle all of the memory and the punching codes in and all of that in a precise, precision manner.
Exactly. So what took place was the guys showed up here for their alert shift. That's what they call the 24 hours. So they would go down into the silo. They would be replacing the 4 guys that are down there. So first thing that's going to happen, they're going to do a 2-hour tie-in with the crew that's leaving. And after that, they would take up their alert shift. So 12 hours later into that shift, they would have to do another whole complete systems check to make sure everything about the missile was up and running so that, again, if the message came through, they could launch it within 3 minutes. Now, in that control room, there had to be 2 people in that room at all times, and one of them had to be either the commander or the deputy commander. There had to be one officer, and it could be the commander and the deputy commander there. If everything was working right, the 2 enlisted guys could go upstairs, catch a break, something like that. They would rotate around depending on what was going on in the silo and stuff like that. So, no, they were not all focused 24 hours on that shift. They didn't want them to get burnout like that. So when the message came into launch, let's say the commander was upstairs asleep. So the deputy commander's there, and then you've got one of the enlisted guys. Now, the 2 enlisted guys could copy the code. They could copy what they heard SAC telling them. And I don't know if you saw, there was those books that were always right there, a 41 alphanumeric message. So the enlisted guy could copy the code, and obviously at that point, somebody is going to be yelling for the commander to get back downstairs because they can't get into the safe. Only the commander and deputy commander can get into the safe. That's how they worked it. Now, they say, it's a 24-hour shift. Well, that turned into more like 36 hours when you really break it on down, because by the time they knew what they were going to work, they would have to show up, meet at the wing commander's post, be briefed on what was going on. That could have been we're on alert status, or we're at DEFCON 2 or something like that, or 571-7, which is the designation of our missile site here. You guys are down for maintenance. That's going to take some time. They're going to have to drive out here. They're going to have to unload all their stuff. They do their shift. They're going to drive back up to Tucson, be debriefed for probably an hour or so. So it did run more than just 24 hours. Your job was more than that.
But they were able to get sleep in between, which
they were able to take a little break. So
that's good. And then what? So their week looked like they worked 24-hour shift, or the 36 hours, or whatever that ended up being. Then they ended up with 2 days off, or
typically the way they described, or their and however you want to look at it, week by week. But they were in the silo 7 to 10 days a month.
Okay,
that's how they came up with it. So they could have had a couple of days off. It was rare. I mean, they couldn't take like a week off or something like that unless they were on TDY or something like that.
So they had other
something else.
They had other jobs that they did besides just working the silo.
No, that was
all that they did.
If you were a missileer, and that's what they called the guys in the Air Force, that was, you didn't do anything else.
Wow. Okay.
So commander and deputy commander obviously were commissioned officers. We knew they were going to be in the Air Force for 20 years. The two enlisted guys were doing a 4-year stint, obviously. And if you were selected to be a missileer, the enlisted guys, they were going to be doing that for 4 years. Uncle Sam and the Air Force spent exorbitant amount of money on their training and also their security clearances. So if you got picked to be a missileer and you got down there and a year later you said, well, this isn't for me, tough luck, buddy. You signed, you said you were going to do this, and you will do it for 4 years.
Wow. Yeah.
Now, the commander and the deputy commander could have, they were commissioned officers, so they could have worked their way somewhere else, probably within Strategic Air Command and in some kind of the Missiles Command or the Missile Systems Command or something like that. So,
well, cool. Okay, so we kind of covered what we see in the underground tour. Mm-hmm. Then we come back on up, and then you have above ground tour, which is pretty interesting also. It's part of the admission fee if you're coming in to do the missile tour. Right. But if you have physical limitations where you can't walk up and down the 55 stairs and be able to do what you need to do there, you could just take the outside tour for it's half price, I think.
Yeah, it's about $7.
Yeah, and it's about $15 to get in or something. So
yeah, so, somewhere around there. So yes, there's stuff to look at. A couple of the really cool things is the viewing stand that we have set up. They have the missile silo about halfway open, and on that halfway open part, there is a glass, kind of like a pyramid. It's a glass dome, if you will. It's not a dome, but you can walk up and actually look down from the very, very top of the silo. You can see clear down to the bottom. You can see the missile actually.
You can see the whole missile.
You can see the whole missile.
And you can see all the way down to the bottom, which is 9 stories down, right? Right. Yeah. These silos are huge. It's
150 feet from the top down to level 8.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a very large thing. And then the missile that we have in the silo is not the missile that was here. It was not the actual tactical missile. The original one was taken out. The missile that you will see if you come was a training missile. That airframe was built specifically to train the maintenance crews on how to work on it. So not having the original missile is a bit of a deal, but since those missiles were fueled up with some very, very toxic chemicals, hydrazine and dinitrogen tetroxide, which were super corrosive to humans, either getting it on your skin or breathing the vapors, we didn't want any of that residual stuff being on the missile itself. Right. So getting back to that, the missile that's in the silo, the engines have been taken off of it, and the engines are up topside so that you can walk around. You can actually see the 2 big first stage engines, the second stage engines, and the little veneer rockets that adjusted the trajectory as it started to come back into the atmosphere.
That's something else, as long as you're talking about trajectory. These missiles were set up and aimed at specific points. That was their only mission, was to hit that one specific target wherever it was sent.
Exactly.
Correct? Because they didn't have the ability with GPS or anything to be able to change these things once they were fired. If they were aimed at Moscow, they were going to Moscow.
Exactly. They could not be redirected in flight. Now, on the tour, you will see the control console, and you will notice that there is a button that says Target 1, Target 2, and Target 3. Now, prior to launch, it could be changed. The missile's guidance system, the computer, was loaded with 3 separate targets. So in the event of whatever the the war planners had decided, for whatever scenario we were talking about, if the crew is sitting there and the missile is set to target 2, we don't know where target 2 was. Nobody knows. Even the crew.
Even today, she said.
Today, that is kept a big secret. So, had they wanted to change from target 2 to target 3 or target 1, that could have been done from decoding that message from SAC.
Okay.
And said that for whatever reason they needed to change the targeting. But we have one big missile with one big warhead. It's only going to go to one place, but we did have the capability to switch.
You had three choices.
3 targets.
Right.
We're going to be. We're going to have a very bad day. The frozen pizza would not be frozen very long.
Okay, and so then we're back up on top on the above ground tour. You've got it set up to where you've got a semi truck that would haul in the
fuel,
the 2 chemicals, and the 2 chemicals were always loaded in the rocket, and then they were mixed at the time that they needed to be mixed.
They were mixed in the combustion chamber.
Right.
So you have your 2 fuels. You have your fuel and your oxidizer. What they used on the Titan II to allow it to have that very, very short launch window was the use of what they call these hypergolic fuels.
Okay.
Hypergolic, in layman's terms, I'm sure everybody has seen what happens when you put Coke and Mentos together.
Right.
It's an instantaneous thing. So Missile did not need a spark, a fuse, or anything like that. What made the missile go was valves that opened up, pushed that fuel and that oxidizer into the combustion chamber of the rocket engine, and it was instantaneous.
Wow. And so you were able to load all those chemicals on the surface through...
Right, piping and everything. Down on level 8, there's the rooms where they actually, the chemicals were... And they had to be kept apart. You notice here at the site, we only have the fuel trailer. Now, the oxidizer trailer is way on the other side of the silo, because if those chemicals came together, you would have one heck of a fire instantaneously. So it was very, very dangerous in that respect. Not only was the fumes as well was a big thing. And as you went down from the Launch Control Center down toward the silo, you may have noticed those environmental suits that were hanging.
Right. Oh yeah.
And so the crews that had to fuel and defuel the rocket or the missile had to have those suits on at all times, because if any of that splashed on you or you inhaled any of those vapors, it was lights out.
Wow. Pretty risky job.
Yeah, there was several guys that met a very grisly end with that fuel and oxidizer.
Wow, that's not cool.
But we are going to get more of the equipment back down here. We're actually doing some revamping of the whole outside site right now. Hopefully within this next year, we will have the oxidizer trailer back out here and some of the ground support trucks that you would have seen if the missile had been going through, let's say they were upgrading the guidance system, or they were changing the warhead out, or doing something with whatever. There was quite a few vehicles that could have been out here when they were doing heavy maintenance on the missile.
Okay. You guys are open every weekday.
7 days a week.
Oh, 7 days a week.
We're open 7 days a week.
Okay.
Right now until June. June through September, we're closed on Mondays and Tuesdays.
Okay. And then you're open from 9 till 5?
First tour is at 10, last tour is at 4 o'clock.
Okay.
Monday through Friday, we do tours on the hour. We're going to start doing some half-hour tours on Mondays and Thursdays. And then on Friday, Saturday, and Sundays, we do tours every half hour.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. And the tours are fantastic. The tour guide that we had did a wonderful job today explaining a lot of things, and had a lot of kind of personal stories that I'm sure she heard from people that had worked down there.
Yep.
That were a lot of fun. This museum is one that you have to come experience. We've talked a lot about it. We've talked more probably about the Titan missile program than what we have actually the museum and some of that, which is also covered in her speech. But it's well worth the visit. It's, 20 minutes, 30 minutes south of
20
Tucson.
minutes south of Tucson. It's 5 minutes off I-19. Very, very easy to get to.
It's a pretty drive even.
Yeah, there's restaurants and stuff down here. Mountains about 12 miles away. Very pretty area up there. And yeah, anybody that's interested, come on out, say hi, do a tour. You won't forget it.
Okay, you guys take reservations on your tours too. If you want to call in early, in order to set up a reservation? When we showed up, we had to wait an hour to be able to get into the next available reservation.
Right.
And people that were just behind us had to wait 2 hours. They weren't going to be able to get in till 2.
Right. So the way it works is because of and you saw
tight spaces.
There's tight spaces down there. We typically don't take more than 26 people on a tour.
Okay.
So the tours will fill up. If you're going to walk in, there is the ability to make reservations on our website, TitanMissileMuseum.com or TitanMissileMuseum.org. It's very easy to find on the internet. There's a link on our site where you can go, you can make a reservation, you can pay for your tickets. You show up here, you're guaranteed a spot. If you do walk in, you run the risk of having depending on what time you show up, of having to wait a little bit.
But even at that, the wait wasn't bad. We were able to go do our own walking tour and spend a little bit of time in the gift shop and look at the other displays before actually hooking up with a tour guide to go down into the silo.
Right. You can do the topside tour.
Right.
Or actually, it's just walking around and looking at stuff. You can do that. You can spend a good half hour reading everything, the exhibits in the visitor center, and walking around outside to easily spend a half an hour doing that, and then be ready to go on the tour.
On the tour, yes. Okay, well, I so appreciate you taking your time today, Mike, to talk to me. This has been great.
My pleasure.
Your museum is awesome, and I'm excited to tell my friends more about it. And the way I finish my podcasts out is I say the world is full of wonder. This one happens to not necessarily be a natural wonder. This one is a phenomenal engineering wonder. The whole space program, Cold War, really makes you wonder.
Exactly. Exactly.
But everybody have an absolutely wonder-filled day.
Great.
All the roll and go, where am I to go? Meet Johnny, where am I to go? For I'm a young and a sailor lad, and where am I to go?